The year is 1324. A desert sun burns over Egypt. Then on the horizon, something strange appears. A cloud of gold dust. Thousands of men walk out of the heat. Camels groan under heavy loads. Horses snort and stamp their feet. At the front of this endless line rides one man. His robe shines. His crown glows. He does not look like a soldier. He looks like a god. The people of Cairo stop and stare. Nobody has ever seen anything like this before. And nobody ever will again. This man is about to break the world's economy. With gold. This is the true story of Mansa Musa. Long before airplanes, before maps were even close to correct, there was a kingdom in West Africa called the Mali Empire. Most people in Europe and the Middle East did not even know it existed. They thought Africa was empty desert and nothing else. They were wrong. Mali sat on top of more gold than any other place on earth. In fact, historians believe that during the Middle Ages, Mali and the lands around it produced almost half of the world's gold supply. Half. Not a small kingdom hiding in the sand. A giant hiding in plain sight. Mansa Musa was born around the year 1280. Mansa was not his first name. It was his title. It meant King of Kings or sometimes Sultan. His real name was Musa, and he was the grandson, or maybe the nephew, of the man who first built the Mali Empire into a powerful state, a warrior king named Sundiata Keita. Musa grew up inside a royal court full of gold dust, salt traders and warriors. He grew up watching his family rule over a kingdom that stretched across rivers, deserts, and trade roads. He learned how kings were supposed to think. He learned how a king protects his people, taxes his merchants, and keeps peace between cities. But Musa was not born to be king. Not at first. In 1312, the king of Mali at the time was a ruler named Abu Bakr II, according to old stories passed down through generations. Abu Bakr became obsessed with one question. What was on the other side of the ocean? He believed the Atlantic Ocean had an end. He believed there was land out there. So he gathered a massive fleet of ships, filled them with men and supplies, and sailed west into open water. He never came back. Not one ship returned. Not one sailor was ever seen again. Some historians today are skeptical about this story. There is no solid proof outside oral tradition. But true or not, it is the story Mali's own people told about their king who vanished into the sea chasing the unknown. When the king disappeared, someone had to take the throne. That someone was Musa. He did not fight a war for it. He did not plot or scheme. The throne came to him almost by accident, dropped into his hands because the previous king sailed off the edge of the known world and never returned. Musa became Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire in the year 1312. He had no idea that within 12 years, his name would be known from West Africa all the way to Europe. Before we get to the famous journey that made him a legend, we need to understand what kind of ruler Musa actually was. He was not just rich. He was smart. Mansa Musa expanded the borders of Mali by conquering new territory, including the legendary city of Timbuktu. Today, the name Timbuktu is almost a joke in English, a word people use to mean some far-off place that doesn't really exist. But Timbuktu was very real. And under Musa's rule, it became one of the greatest centers of learning on the entire planet. He built mosques. He built libraries. He invited scholars, poets, lawyers, and architects to come live in his cities. He turned Timbuktu into a city where students traveled from far away just to study mathematics, law, astronomy, and religious scripture. Under his rule, Mali's empire grew to include over 400 cities and towns. Merchants traveled in and out constantly, trading salt, gold, copper, and enslaved people along routes that stretched across the entire region. Musa taxed this trade carefully, making sure his kingdom profited from every camel that crossed his land. He was, by every measure available to historians, one of the most successful rulers of his time. But none of that is why the rest of the world remembers him. The rest of the world remembers him because of one trip. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to do something every devout Muslim is encouraged to do at least once: the Hajj, a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. This alone was not unusual. Thousands of Muslims made this journey every year. What was unusual was how Musa decided to do it. He did not travel quietly. He did not bring a small group of guards and advisors. Mansa Musa brought an army of wealth so large that it would be remembered for nearly 700 years. Historical records, written by people who watched him pass through their cities, describe a caravan that stretched for miles. Some accounts say he traveled with 60,000 people, soldiers, servants, officials, singers, cooks, wives, slaves. Among them were 12,000 servants alone, many of them dressed in fine Persian silk. And then there was the gold. Historians estimate that Musa brought somewhere between 18 and 24 tons of pure gold on this trip. Some accounts describe 80 to 100 camels, each one loaded down with gold dust and gold bars, walking step by step across the Sahara Desert. Imagine that for a second. Not one camel carrying treasure like in a movie. There are 100 camels. An entire walking treasury moving slowly across sand dunes that stretch farther than the eye can see. Musa did not hide this wealth. He showed it off on purpose to every city he passed through. When Musa's caravan reached Cairo, Egypt in July of 1324, the city had never experienced anything like it. Musa met with the Sultan of Egypt and, out of respect and generosity, began giving away gold. Not small gifts, massive amounts. He gave gold to officials. He gave gold to scholars. He gave gold to poor people on the street. He gave gold to anyone who crossed his path and asked. At first, this seemed like an incredible act of kindness from an unbelievably wealthy king. Then something strange started happening. The value of gold in Cairo began to crash. Think about it from a simple angle. If gold is rare, it is valuable. But suddenly Cairo was flooded with so much free gold that merchants could not keep prices steady. Inflation hit the city hard. The price of food, goods, and basic supplies shot up because gold, the thing people used to measure value, had become too common, at least for a little while. Historians studying Egyptian records found that it took close to 12 years for Cairo's economy to fully recover from Mansa Musa's visit. 12 years. One man passing through on his way to pray caused over a decade of economic disruption in one of the largest cities in the world. By the time he reached Mecca itself, completed his religious pilgrimage, and turned back toward home. Mansa Musa had spent so much gold that, according to legend, he actually ran out partway through the return trip. He reportedly had to borrow money from a merchant in Cairo just to make it back to Mali. Even his money running out story became famous. The merchant who lent it to him reportedly made a fortune in interest once Musa paid him back. Before this trip, most of Europe had little to no understanding of West Africa. They had heard whispers of a wealthy kingdom, but nothing confirmed, nothing solid. After Musa's journey to Mecca, that changed completely. Word of his wealth spread across the Mediterranean world like wildfire. Traders talked about it, scholars talked about it, and eventually mapmakers got involved. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer named Abraham Cresques created what is now known as the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important maps of the medieval world. On this map, sitting right in the middle of West Africa, is a drawing of a king on a golden throne, holding a gold nugget in one hand and a golden scepter in the other. That king is Mansa Musa. For the first time, Europe placed West Africa on the map, not as empty space, but as the home of the richest man in the world. He did not just visit Cairo and Mecca and disappear into legend. He changed how the entire world understood Africa. When Mansa Musa finally returned to Mali, he did not just bring back religious blessings and a worn-out treasury. He brought back architects, scholars, and poets he had recruited during his travels. One of the most famous men he brought home was a poet and architect named Abu Es-Haq Es-Saheli, who Musa hired in Mecca and convinced to return to Mali with him. Es-Saheli is credited with helping design and build some of Mali's most famous structures, including the Djingareba Mosque in Timbuktu, a building that still stands today, centuries later, made of mud bricks and wooden beams, in a style that became unique to the region. Musa used his wealth and the knowledge he gathered from his journey to turn Timbuktu into something extraordinary. It became home to the University of Sankore, a center of learning where scholars studied law, medicine, astronomy, and Islamic theology. At its peak, Timbuktu under Musa's rule may have housed as many as 25,000 students and scholars. Along with massive libraries, holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Some of those manuscripts still exist today, hidden away in private family collections in Mali, protected and passed down for generations. This was not a backward kingdom getting lucky with gold. This was a sophisticated empire using its wealth to become a center of education and faith that rivaled cities in Europe and the Middle East. Mansa Musa ruled Mali for about 25 years. During that time, he expanded its borders, built its reputation, strengthened trade, and made his empire one of the wealthiest and most respected in the world. He died sometime around 1337, though historians are not entirely certain of the exact year. After his death, his son took over the throne, but Mali's incredible run at the top of the world stage slowly began to fade in the decades and centuries that followed. Internal conflicts, invasions, and the natural rise of new empires elsewhere eventually caused Mali to shrink. But here is the thing about Mansa Musa. Empires fall. Gold gets spent. Cities change hands, but stories survive. Centuries later, modern historians and economists tried to put a number on Mansa Musa's wealth. Just to understand how rich he truly was, the estimates are almost impossible to comprehend. Some calculations have placed his net worth, adjusted for today's value, at over $400 billion. Others argue it is impossible to even calculate accurately, because his wealth was not just money. It was control over the gold and salt trade across an entire region of the world, something modern currency cannot fully measure. To put that in perspective, that estimate would make him wealthier than every billionaire alive today, combined, by some calculations. But the real reason Mansa Musa's story still grabs people today is not just the size of the number. It is the way he used it. He did not hide his fortune behind palace walls. He carried it across a desert in plain sight. He gave it away to strangers without asking for anything back. He used it to build mosques, universities, and libraries that educated people for generations after he was gone. He turned a quiet West African kingdom that most of the world had never heard of into a name that mapmakers in Spain felt they had to draw onto their charts of the entire known world. Ati, king who was never supposed to rule, who took the throne almost by accident after his predecessor sailed into the ocean and vanished, ended up becoming arguably the wealthiest human being in recorded history. And he did it not through war, not through conquest alone, but largely through gold faith trade and one unforgettable walk across the desert toward Mecca. That cloud of gold dust on the horizon in 1324 was not just a king passing through Cairo. It was history walking forward, one camel at a time.